Nau mai kia Native Affairs. Striking a balance between big business and a clean green image is a fine line. The government only requires fresh waterways to be safe for wading and boating. For one, Te Uriroroi man, Millan Ruka, that simply isn't good enough, nor is the state of the thousands of kilometres of Northland's waterways he patrols. Adrian Stevenon went upstream with Ngāpuhi's River Cop.
Green, unclean, NZ. It's not an official slogan, but it's officially the state of so many of our fresh waterways. 2/3 of our rivers are reportedly too dirty to swim in. And this is a big part of the problem.
I get pissed off because mimi in our river, they're fouling and defecating all along the riverbank here. Yeah, it's pretty annoying.
Annoying, frustrating, and destructive for a man who remembers a time when this river was pristine.
I can remember when this water was as clear, you could see the bottom here on a day like today. You could see eels swimming around. Down the lower part, you could see mullet. But no, you can't today. You can't. The clarity of the river now, you're lucky to see 1 foot deep into the water. The bulk of the degradation has taken place in the last 25 years, pretty much. I feel devastated in my lifetime that it's taken place in such a short time.
Millan Ruka grew up on the banks of Northland's Wairua River, and after years of watching its demise, he decided he needed to do something. So he got out on his waka and started investigating the causes of pollution. 4 years ago, he stepped up his game, quit his job, and started patrolling Northland's waterways full-time.
I've paddled most every river around this region at some stage. Paddled it or walked it, and walked in it sometimes.
What he's found isn't pretty. And when it comes to polluting our waterways, Millan says cattle are enemy number one.
Seen a lot of dead cattle. That's offensive, you know, when you see it. We've got unfenced cattle polluting directly into the waterway, and that's a major polluter. But I think what definitely supersedes that, though, is the non-compliance of effluent discharge. We continually smell discharges on the river when the milking's finished, and out of the cow sheds of the effluent ponds, the runoff from the ponds is starting to make its way down into the river.
Every incident of pollution Millan comes across is photographed with GPS coordinates, filed into a report, and then sent on to the Northland Regional Council and other authorities responsible for protecting the environment. To date, he's filed more than 100 reports. He says most of the time, the Regional Council take little to no action.
Acted on the first dozen or so in a sort of reasonable way, but there wasn't necessarily a good outcome, but they did, you know, respond to them. And then they went off the boil pretty much, and now the council sort of adopted a stance where they will respond so that they can say they've responded, but still the outcomes are not there. We can go back time and time again to a previous report. Hello, there's cattle still there.
Millan he's a really enthusiastic guy. He's got a real passion for the water quality in Northland.
Local farmer and Northland Regional Council Chair Bill Shepherd says his council takes Millan's reports very seriously, but says often the evidence he supplies isn't enough to act on.
By the time we get the report, it's well after the event. So if he photographs some stock in a waterway, for example, by the time we get a report 2 or 3 weeks later, the stock are probably nowhere near that waterway.
Part of Millan's beef with the Regional Council is that they don't enforce sections of the Resource Management Act that he believes are breached every time a farmer allows a cow to use a river or a stream as a toilet.
Part of the Resource Management Act says it's a duty on all persons to avoid, remedy or mitigate adverse effects on the environment. Surely cows defecating in streams and grazing next to waterways is a breach of that.
I know he uses that argument. the fact that a cow stands in a waterway doesn't mean to say it's urinating or defecating in there. You'd understand that from the legal standpoint, getting from the point of seeing a photo of a cow that was taken 2 weeks ago to the point of where you can actually prosecute someone for having an animal defecating in the waterway is quite a big legal stretch.
Grazing next to fresh waterways and defecating into streams is actually permitted by the council. Why is that?
Well, that's because of the way the RMA is written. It is a permitted activity that you don't actually have to... If you go past being a permitted activity, then you start getting into having to have consents to farm and this sort of thing, which is not where the community has wanted us to be.
Back on patrol, and Millan has spotted a herd of cows grazing by the water. It's not the first time he's seen cows here. He says it's a regular occurrence that the regional council doesn't seem to care about.
And this is a common occurrence, you know, and they just fill up, you know, where they stand here, graze around, get to the river, have a drink, have a mimi, and it just soaks up all of these pockmarks here. And these pockmarks fill up with urine, and it's putrid. And then bigger rain comes, and it all just sweeps down to into the river right here. Right. And all of this fouling here, excrement, it's all the same, all goes into the river. And that's what's feeding all of this weed here. Right. Apart from all of the effluent runoff that comes from the effluent ponds of all the dairy farms here. So all adds to the deterioration of the river.
We decided to put Millan's theory to the test and took water samples from different sites around Northland, during both a big dry spell and after a big downpour of rain, and had the samples independently tested for E. coli to see if any of the waterways were safe to swim in. According to the Ministry for Environment's guidelines, any E. coli reading above 260 poses a risk of developing illness. Any reading above 550 is a significant health risk and is not safe for swimming in. Of the 7 samples we took during the dry weather, all but 1 were found to be safe for swimming. This sample tested just below the council's red flag mark of 550. But a post-rain sample we collected from the Whangarei Falls, a popular swimming hole, is cause for concern. Remember, any E. coli reading above 550 is not safe to swim in. Our test came back with an E. coli level of 5,475, nearly 10 times above what is considered unsafe for swimming. At the time we filmed these pictures, the District Council had red flagged the falls as unsafe for swimming. And these animal carcasses are an example of what Millan has found just upstream.
Lots of kids swimming there. It's a favourite swimming hole for Whangarei, and yet just up around the corner there's heaps of cattle fouling that waterway up there.
Some of the E. coli is undoubtedly coming off agricultural land, and agricultural land's not just cows, it's a whole range of different livestock, and in some instances it's coming from wildfowl as well, like birds. Some of those things we can control, some of them, and improve. Some of them are more difficult, and it's one of the things that this council is looking in our long-term plan, which we're just currently working through, is putting more investment into investigating and measuring what's actually going on so that we can get a better handle on what we need to do.
In Millan's experience, the problems are obvious, and so are the solutions.
There needs to be more money at the coalface, you know, put straight into the fencing, never mind studying the effects of it all.
Slowly but surely, more Northland farmers are hearing Millan's call to keep cows away from our rivers. Ben Smith is one of those converts who's fenced off his waterways and thinks all in his business should do the same.
What do you make of Millan's work?
He's like the Dalai Lama of the waterways. He doesn't do it in an offensive manner, but he does it in a constructive and achievable manner. It's created an awareness in New Zealand primary industry to the dumping ground that a lot of waterways have been made of for generations now.
While he shares Millan's concern for fresh water, he's also concerned about the way some farmers and local government see Millan.
I heard him described one day as one of those coconuts in a hollowed-out canoe riding down the river that should just float out to the Pacific and go home to his island. And I was quite offended at that time by that commentary. And the big thing for me is when it was coming from a district councillor saying things like that, made me realise how much pressure is being put on both local bodies, farmers and individuals to actually action it.
There's still a few head of cattle up above here. So we've got good growth on the banks at the moment.
But no fencing.
But no fences. You can see no fence across the top.
One of Millan's solutions to the region's pollution problems is to fence off all waterways where animals are farmed. He says more dairy farms are getting fenced as a result of the Fonterra Fresh Streams Accord, which pledges to increase its commitment to fencing.
It's patchy, depending on the farmer, you know. You've got some very compliant farmers and you've got some that don't care at all.
Beef farms like this, on the other hand, are dragging the chain because there is no legal requirement for any farm to fence their waterways. And instead of punishing the unfenced, the Northland Regional Council is encouraging farmers to tap into their environmental fund that matches farmers dollar for dollar for any spending on fencing and riparian planting.
Part of the challenge for Northland is that a lot of our waterways are through quite rough, tough sort of country, and if you're talking fencing and riparian planting, it's really expensive per kilometre. From the council perspective, we're in a balancing situation where we've got to balance the need for environmental improvements, maintenance and improvements, balance that off against the affordability for the community.
As far as Millan's concerned, we can't afford not to take better care of our awa. And that message seems to be getting through to farmers on this stretch of the Wairua River. 4 years ago, Millan says there was almost no fencing here. Today, nearly 80% of the places we visited had fences. While his war to clean up our fresh waterways is far from over, Millan's battle on this stretch is close to being won.
So no cattle this time, Millan, on this trip. Is that a first?
Yeah, it's a first on this part. We've seen some at a distance, you know, that are unfenced, but no cattle down on the riverbanks, and that's a good sign. So over 7 kilometres, no cattle, that's good. I'm pleased to be there.
Ko Adrian Stevenonteira I ripoata ana. Now the owner of the cows we filmed by the river has come forward. Turns out the cows belong to Ben Smith, who featured in our story. And on Facebook he wrote, "Public apology, the cows in that vision are mine. Although my area is fenced, they broke out due to an electric fence not being connected. Some of us are trying." Coming up after the break, we're on the campaign trail in the Northland by-election.